Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel, One Day with Alex. Today, we are doing something a little different and new. Um, Today, I'm going to be interviewing my brother, who is a book writer. He has released two books that are doing pretty well on Amazon. They're available on all platforms, right?
Um, Amazon mainly Amazon.
Mainly Amazon. Okay. So on mainly Amazon, today we're doing a little interview for him to learn more about his book. If you guys enjoy this podcast session, whatever, um, be sure to check out his material and subscribe to the channel. He also has his own channel. He has the Rikeren and the Dan Writes
Yes.
and the Dan Writes. So all of that will be linked in the description. All right, Dan, go ahead and let them know who you are.
Yeah, I just came out with a couple of my first books on Amazon, just like how Alex mentioned, and I'm really excited to share them with you.
Alrighty. Let me see the two hard copies. He just got two hard copies printed.
Oop.
So his first book, The Herrscher Files, is available for print, and his newly released second book, the what was it?
The Dark Side
The
Trials.
Dark Side Trials is also available for print. Let me see him. Any other one? Okay. So just to give you guys a closer look at it, there's one, and the back, and here is the other.
He's got a skull.
The skull and the back. All right, so let's go ahead and get on with it. So, Dan, tell me, why did you become a book author? Like, what led you on that path?
Well, I that's a good question to start with because I knew I wanted to be involved with storytelling in some degree when I was a kid, but I didn't know, that writing, on paper would be the way to do it. Because I remember being inspired by like cartoon shows on TV and video games, seeing these characters go on their adventures together and go through all sorts of like conflicts together. And I would always imagine like having my own character as part of their group, like sort of like an OC. But and this was also reinforced by some friends I had that had like a similar taste. Like they'd also have like their own OCs based on a franchise or something like that, and they'd like make little fan fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they'd make fan comics or whatever, or fan animations online, and I really wanted to be part of that, but I didn't really have the the skills or the know-how to really do anything yet. But one thing that really stood out to me in my memory was when I had this idea for for this character, and I told Alex that, what if it was this character that, he can control like computers and stuff, and he can summon these robots to like fight for him and stuff. And then Alex looked at me and he said, "Dude, just write a book." And and that basically just started me on that path. And yeah.
Oh, also forgot to mention that Daniel writes fiction, science fiction, or just fiction?
Yeah, fiction, science fiction
Fiction
and
fantasy.
science fiction and fantasy.
Science fiction fantasy. So if you are interested in those, please give these a read. These are short stories. They don't, they're short. They're a compilation of mini stories. So it's not gonna take you a lot of time. And yeah, so I said that for you to write a book.
Yeah, I remember like we were at a party or something,
Oh,
and
okay,
I
okay.
remember just like chilling on my phone or something. Like I just remember sitting at a table with you, and then we were just talking to each other, and then you asked me like, like I forgot how we got to that conversation, but I just remember like, oh, I have this idea for like this character because I think at that point we were still like writing like these little like ideas
Mm.
on that Pages app on Apple
Oh yeah.
way back then. Like we had
Hmm.
those little story snippets that we just make. So I was like wanted to add my own to it.
Okay. So since the time of your first book, how do you feel about it? Like actually getting that story out there and and stuff like that. Like how was the process for that?
For the Herrscher
For the
files,
Herrscher files, yeah.
it was pretty interesting to be honest. Like, cause I wrote that book as part of an assignment in Full Sail University, the college that I graduated from, and I remember the first one of the first assignments that actually dealt with like writing the stories. They told me like, oh, you have to make sure that you know how to like describe the five senses, and all that kind of stuff, and then you gotta write dialogue for a full like page or two, and then the third assignment was you gotta write a full flash fiction story, which is like micro fiction, basically, and that's basically how the first story in the Herrscher files came about, the Herrscher's Revenge. It's still my proudest work right now.
Okay.
One of my proudest works.
Okay. And you put how many stories in the book?
For the Herrscher files, there's 5 stories in total.
Okay. Do you ever think in the future? I know you're working on something new. We'll talk about that near the end. But is there like the stories from the first book? Is there anything that you would want to expand on? I remember seeing a. I don't remember for which book, but there was a comment on Amazon. Someone asked like, "Oh, this story was too short. I want to know more." So like, if you continue to get feedback like that, do you ever want to expand on a story?
That's that's a good one. Like I because certain stories I get just randomly in my head, and then I just have to like make sure I get it onto the page before I forget about it, kind of thing. But like I feel like for certain stories, it's just like a one and done thing because, it's just like an experimental thing. But I every story I write has impact on influence. I mean, on like the future stories that I write. Like for example, what's it called? The In the second book that I wrote, there was a story that dealt with like technology and nanites, which are like tiny nanocomputers. And that concept was repurposed into a future story that I'm currently working on. And same thing for the Lightning Queen, which is the third, I think, story in the Herrscher files.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it could be expanded upon, but it depends on how it resurfaces.
Okay, that's good. And how long did it take you to, from start to finish, to make the Herschel files?
Um, I'm not entirely sure, but I would guess that it took around maybe a year, like or around a year, because um, I wrote each story as part of an assignment, and they were all separate at first, and then there was this final assignment where I had to like take those stories and then compile them into a book format and then publish it if I wanted to, which I did. And I think that took, if not a year, at least several months.
And do you like that format of like the short stories, or like like as of now, since you made two books in the same format, do you really like making short stories, or do you want to move on to make like a whole novella or a whole book?
Um, this was really like tough for me to like grapple with on my own because The fact that I came from a college that didn't really allow me to like, write longer form fiction during the assignments, I was like I don't really have the experience yet to like do that kind of thing yet. You know, everyone in the writing industry, like everyone talks about novels or novellas or mostly long form fiction, and I felt like that's the kind of thing that I should do. But eventually, I came to love the short story format, because it's there's there's a lot of things you can explore in that kind of format, compared to a novel where you have to like stay in the same story for a much longer period of time.
Right.
And for some, for some, in some cases that can get exhausting, or sometimes you can get a little burned out. But if you were to say explore like multiple points of view in a single world, that can be really like that can be really interesting. Like, what are these situations kind of thing.
It keeps things fresh.
Exactly.
Now I have to ask. Moving from the Herrscher files, actually, why call it the Herrscher files? Like, how did you come up with this name?
There, that was also part of the assignment to like turn it into a book, those 5 stories. And they basically allowed us free reign on the title. You could either call it like short story collection or something like that. And because the short story I wrote was called The Herrscher's Revenge, and I see some short story collections call themselves like the something files or the something collection or the something uh, compendium or codex or the that kind of theme. And I like file because it has like a techie kind of tone to it. So I decided to just take the Herrscher part for the first story and then just add files to it because it makes it look like a collection of documents that someone has like collected together into like a log, kind of
Oh,
like an organization has like a document called the Herrscher files or something.
oh.
It feels like SCP kind of stuff to me.
You do take a lot of inspiration from the SCP.
The SCP Foundation.
Yeah. So for those who don't know what the SCP is, I mean, you probably would explain it better than I would. So I'll let you do that.
It's I would say it's like a fan community project that allows a bunch of people to come together and like basically into this write into this canon of strange anomalies that this organization called the Foundation discovers, and then they have to like capture it, and they have to study it and hopefully keep it away from the general population from wrecking havoc.
So like
Hence the secure, contain, and protect acronym.
would be for SCP.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So for like an example, like let's say there's like a warehouse of mannequins that come alive for some reason. And they offed a few people. So the SCP would come and take care of it, like he said, and so that the general public doesn't know about it, and they store like trophies and documentations of these strange anomalies and occurrences. And like Daniel said, it is like a community thing. It's where like everyone just adds to this overarching narrative, and it's all online
Yeah.
where everyone like adds in a story and people read them and expand upon them. You would see like one person start this story, end it, and then it will continue on with someone else's story. So it's like a big encyclopedia
Yeah.
of like this one fiction that will that will live on forever as long as people have the awareness of it and the willingness to keep it going,
You're right.
which is really cool to keep. It's like a living novel, right?
Yeah, and there actually are like there's a section of the SCP website where you can write entire tales, which are basically like short stories involving SCPs. So you can straight up just write a story.
So if anyone watching this and you are an aspiring like writer or any type of creative, I would definitely recommend checking out the SCP and just taking a look at the stories. So so I think that would be everything for your first book. Actually, what would be your favorite story in your Herrscher files that you wrote? I know you love all of them, but if you had a favorite, what would it be and why?
As much as I want to like, think about it and, consider, you know, because all of them come from a certain place and like have their own meaning to me, but there's really no contest for me because the first one, the Hersher's Revenge, is just it just stands out to me so much. Like the when you read it, you'll understand why. Like there's these two opposing characters, and that they're just battling it out, and there's this little conversation they have at the same time about something that happened, and like it just has this element of fantasy and sci-fi at the same time. And the ending is, I'm not going to spoil it, but the ending is also like very it has a very like open-ended ending, I'll say.
Like to make people want to know.
Yeah, like what could happen after that. And funny enough, the concept for the Hersher's Revenge, was inspired by a character from Genshin Impact because I don't know if you remember him, but like the wind,
Oh, the first one, the first
yeah,
guy,
the guy who represents the First Nation, Venti.
Venti.
He's the inspiration for like the antagonist, the Herrscher.
Okay.
I think you'll see the parallels when you read it.
So you take a lot of inspiration, like you said, from games, anime, of course, other novels too. So from Genshin and what's the other game? Warframe, and a lot of other MiHoYo and H3
Did you,
Honkai,
oh right,
Honkai and stuff.
yeah.
These these stories, why are you drawn to these types of media in gaming and such?
Why am I drawn to these types of media?
Since
Like,
I've known you, like for example, I know you always loved a robotic, a mech, something that shoots a missile or a techie. So yeah, so why did these things draw your interest?
it's, I guess when it comes down to it, it's like the coolness factor for me. Like, I thought it was because, like, there's these people that are so smart. They can create teleporters and floating robots that can annihilate a city or whatever, or build entire cities. And like that aspect of sci-fi, like always had me obsessed with the genre because to me that kind of understanding of like technology felt like something that could possibly maybe happen to a degree. Be And not that's not to say I don't like fantasy. Like I do love fantasy, but it's more like a you understand it on a more of a mystical sense. Like this works, but you have to but it's more of an arcane technology. And with the kinds of media that I usually indulge myself in, like Warframe, they have those space ninjas and the corpus with the what do you call them? their MOAs, their Ospreys, all their robotics, like, and I like whatever can deploy shields on top, like it just all looks very cool to me, very cool, and I wanted to emulate that.
Okay. Yeah, no, yeah, that makes sense. Well, that's cool. So I think that's everything for the first book. So now let's transition to the Dark Side Trials. Now this book is a very stark contrast to the first book, which is like more ethereal, very anonymous. Anonymous? No, not like what's that word?
Like,
Eerie. Like it's a mystery. It's like going like it's like a void area or something. So going from here to like this skull and dark and everything. Why this? Why this theme?
what's interesting about the Dark Side Trials, that's this was completely like optional for me to like make that a thing, but that was also a collection of short stories I wrote during college. But the subject matter, generally at least, was at least a little darker compared to the Herrscher files. Like it was more, a lot more leaning on the side of like, oh, this character shouldn't do that thing, but they do it anyway, and now they're gonna suffer the consequences. At least some of the stories in that book have that theme, and I wanted to put that together because that's also another thing that was I'm honestly morbidly interested in as a subject matter. Like, what if the dark side won, or what if the character gives in to their uh, darker desires, kind of thing.
Alrighty. So it takes more. Okay. That's yeah. That's interesting. That's really cool. Like really diving into, what we generally don't see a lot of the time. Like, which is kind of funny because it makes me think of DC Comics, where like most DC fans love the villains in it. Like
Yeah,
they find them more interesting than the heroes a lot of the time, like Joker. And even though he's like a psychopath or whatever, he's not a hero in any means. He's not a good guy in any means. He's straight up a villain in multiple instances, but
loves chaos.
loves chaos, loves the killing joke. But people are drawn to that darkness. It's just fascinating. So in this book, in the Dark Side Trials, how many stories do you have in this one?
I believe six.
Okay, so one more than your last.
Yeah, but two of them are more on the side of flash fiction. They're a bit shorter,
Okay.
but most of them are multiple pages long. Yeah,
Yeah, it is a thicker book, I believe,
yeah, it's a little bit longer.
a little bit longer. And so besides the theme that we talked about, what can people really expect? So like what was the pro actually what was the process for your headspace writing this book? So we know about your theme. Now, how like for the stories that you created, like what was your process for this one?
My process was a little different for each story. Say for example, the first one. I think that would be the best example. It's it had a bit of a troubled like development for me because I had to write this story that had a bit of like realistic elements in it. Like I didn't really rely on like futuristic technology in it as much. I tried to make it. I tried to make it show what would happen if the main character was brought up in a dark and straight up corrupt kind of world, and what kind of decisions would she make, if she didn't really have a moral compass to begin with.
It's more survival.
Yeah, well, survival, yeah, survival and like survival versus the mission kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And for I'd say for like the next few stories, things were different. Things were a little different, but I tried to like remain on that theme in general. Like for the next story after that, the tone shifts dramatically, but it still has that idea of like making bad decisions kind of thing. Because it deals with like a teenager basically doing, oh, I'm going to have a party while my supervisor aren't in the house kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
and can they deal with the decision that they make?
Okay. So how dark would you say this book goes? Like, what are things that you try to elevate the sense of the name?
For the sense of the name, like Dark Side Trials.
Like, did you change any language? Is there more graphic scenes? Are there more, things that, that
That I might have to like warn people about,
not warn
but
people
like just to like tell you like what how far it
for
goes in
why
terms of
for why
the
it's like
title.
yeah, for why it's the Dark Side Trials. Yeah. Like you've already talked about its theme, you talked about like the process, but like what did you do to elevate those things?
Well, for the first story, I'll say that there's a lot of like, not a lot, but like, there's a general sense of like, the main character doesn't hesitate to like kill people, for example. Like, she's straight up an assassin.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if this is a spoiler, but it deals with the, how far is she willing to go, who's she not willing to kill kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in one of the later stories, this kind of deals with like, one guy's ability to like self indulge for a short minute, but a short amount of time, but he's kind of prevented from it, even though he pretty much tells the reader, that he wants to like self indulge in like darker things, like the mere willingness to do it, I guess.
Okay. So like these characters, they really don't have that like that sense of
Morality.
morality or thinking like is should I really be doing, is this the right thing to do? They're just going for it, really. Like they're aware that they're going for it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And how long did it take you to write this one?
How long did it take? That's tough. I don't actually remember.
Like what's the estimate?
Um,
Like do you think it was another year?
I think I published the Herrscher files in um around 2021 or 2022. So possibly, yeah, it took another year to get the Dark Side Trials out because I was on break, so to speak, from school. But then I was like, where do I go from here, kind of thing, like.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw like I still had some unpublished stories from college, so I was like, okay, I'll just like touch these up and publish these too.
That's really good that you had stories, like unfinished projects that you were able, like you said, like to finish up and to make them into something and get it out there. That's really, really good. Because like for I know people that they try to make something new off the bat with no material, no preparation, and it's really hard to get your mind going off the ground. So how was this process of making this book compared to the Hersher? Was it easier? Was it a little bit more difficult, or did you have to change something to get it going? Like how was it?
I would say it was easier in terms of putting it together for publication because I'd already dealt with publishing the Herrscher files once. So I had some experience there. So I just needed to make sure I refined my process for the second book. But it was not easier in terms of like editing the stories in the second book because I remembered I had a bit of trouble like getting them because in college there's a certain level of like understanding that you need to display in each story for the teachers to like give you high marks, which is understood because you need to show that you understand the material they're giving you. And I struggled with it with some of these. Like for example, the first story, the Vesselant, the assassin, I think I had to rework it at least once or twice before I was comfortable with it because it was much longer at first, but I wasn't really comfortable with what how it worked at first. Like it
Mm-hmm.
felt like it droned on, and especially with the instructor's feedback, I felt like I had to address the feedback. Like I felt like she has some points here, she has some points there too. I'll try my best to like see what I can do to improve it.
Okay. So when it comes to feedback, and you're new, so the feedback will be coming over time. Um, how do you feel? Like obviously, as long as it's constructive and actually like saying something of importance, how likely are you to implement those comments in your work?
Like I think in terms of constructive feedback, it depends on how because I'm willing to use any kind of feedback I can in my stories as long as it like gels with like my writing style
Hmm.
or if it's feasible for the story kind of
Right.
thing. But if I have to rework a large portion of the story for something to work, I will. At the same time, if I see some feedback that feels too vague, like I have to ask to clarify that, or if it feels like I don't really understand where it's going, like I'm not really like what's the point of this, not really saying like what's the point of this, but like where do I implement this exactly kind of thing. Like I'm not entirely like what direction do you want me to go without compromising my the story that I have.
So as long as it fits within the vision, you would consider, like okay, I can do something here, and oh, I can be a bit more whatever here. But if it's just like just completely out of the left field,
Yeah.
which is completely understandable, of course. So, my next question is, with these stories, what inspired this?
Like these
Like
this
the
whole thing.
like the whole thing, the whole book. Like what inspired that? Because you have, like you said, you Warframe, Genshin, stuff like that, where you drew from. What were your inspirations for these themes? Even though you had the material, but as you were cleaning it, making it together, what was in your mind?
As an inspiration for the story, or like what was going through my head when I was revising them.
All of it. Let's hear it all.
Well, for the first part, the I was inspired by I was inspired by different games and media like DC Universe like games. Or I remember I used to play DC Universe online a lot. Sometimes I still do, but not nearly as much. But I remember like I made some characters that I still like think about. because I'm like, what if I use these characters in a story kind of thing? Like, I don't want them to just be in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of, at least in the name and like the general look of the character, I tend to import them into some of my stories. And some of my other stories, like say the third one, I think it's called the Project Ascension. This one felt more like a prototype for a future story that I'm also working on because of the sci-fi aspect mostly. Like it deals with a scientist working on like this impossible project, and what the world at large kind of hints toward in that story, and what he's trying to accomplish for humanity. So I wanted to use that as a blueprint for see if my other ideas can work. Same thing for the first story too. Like that one felt like a prototype of sorts, but it's very self-contained. It feels very like it can stand on its own two legs kind of thing. And as for how I revised them, I'm still not entirely like. Sometimes I had to realize that at some point I have to just be at peace with like where the story is, and that my skill level in terms of like writing and editing the stories on my own. But I was very grateful for the feedback that I got for the Dark Side Trials, because I probably wouldn't have done as substantial the changes that I made, because I wouldn't have had like the direction to make those changes with. So I tried to condense things down while also like driving home the central point that I had originally. So I tried to get you to get rid of like what I considered like I can get rid of this, or like basically condense it into something quicker or something like that, and then try and give the characters some more like nuance at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like kind of shift things around, so to speak.
All right. So I think that's all the questions I have for both your books. Um, so just want to let you know that you are a very talented writer. I'm very excited to see what your next work is. I know you're working on something big. Do you want to talk about that? Like, like a little bit of what you're currently working on. Is it another short story book, or is it going to be something more standalone? What can you say?
So to give a sneak peek into what I'm working on at the moment, it's something that I try to hold close to my heart, but more recently I started to think of it more as like an open project, so to speak, like because of the amount of changes that I made to it over the years, and the general tonal shift that happened to the stories that I write within that world. The main thing that I'll give away is that the title of the project is called Project Vanguard, and it's a sci-fi world, and right now I'm trying to write or edit a short story in that series.
Wait, so like that's the project name?
That's the series name.
Oh, Project Vanguard is the series.
Yes.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Okay. Uh-huh.
Funny enough, it used to be like several different names, and it
Until
kept like
like
changing it, changing it, changing it.
you should totally do like how they do in games where it's like this is Project
Project,
like yeah,
like
Project
Project
Macro,
Arrowhead.
Arrowhead, whatever. And that way that you could have an idea. So like for future interviews and stuff, if I do Or if anyone really asks, like, "Oh, what are you working on?" It's like, "Oh, I'm doing this," and the project name is Arrowhead or whatever, something like give a little tease of what it could be and stuff like that. I think that would be cool. I don't think that that's something that people do in books.
Like a project for the series or like the
Project
act,
name, like just the project name.
just the project name.
Yeah.
It could you could do both, honestly. Like
No, just the name. So that's
just the project name then.
yeah. It's like, oh, what are you working on? Well, currently I'm working on a new book, and it's called Project um, Big Dipper or something. And it's like, ooh, Big Dipper. Like, what could that be about? Like that's it. It's not the name. It's just something that you can give out as like, this is what I'm working on.
All right.
Mhm.
I see what you mean.
I think that would be really really cool. So we're reaching up to the end. So I'm just gonna talk to the audience real quickly. If you guys have any questions, please leave them down in the comments. We would love to hear from you. If you are an inspiring art author, I was gonna say not. So many words came in my head. If you are an inspiring author or anything like that, and you have questions for Daniel, please leave them down in the comments or on his channel. Um, we just really love to hear from you. A lot of people just don't leave comments for some reason when people ask. I don't understand it. So it's like, leave a comment. If you don't have anything to ask, just put something like um leave like a book emoji or something. I don't know. We want to know that people are there.
If you reach the end of the video, leave a book emoji.
Yeah, book emoji. Um so for okay, so we talked about your interest in games and your inspiration there. What are the authors that you read? Like, what are the people that you look up to um, that are in the same field as you?
That's a pretty good one. Like, um, I feel like this is kind of. I feel like this is gonna be
All
a.
right, turning on three lights.
Oh,
No one was talking to you, Google.
Okay, we can chat some other time.
Mm-hmm.
what was I saying? I feel like this is gonna be like a. I don't know if it's like a hot take or something, but I only listen to like a small handful of like authors in my what do you call it, palette or something like that.
Yeah.
I recently read Elantris from Brandon Sanderson, and I listened to his podcast quite a lot. I used to read books quite often when I was still in high school, like Maze Runner. I That series was pretty huge for me.
Mm-hmm.
I read a good portion of Harry Potter when I was in middle and high school. And right now I'm reading through the Heroes Code series. I think it's called Paragon's Fall from A.R. Knight, which is another like superhero sci-fi storytelling kind of thing. It's also freely available on YouTube too. And I also got one of the Star Trek novels. I think it's called Insurrection. Star Trek Insurrection or well, it'll be in the description. but
Okay.
but I read as much as I read books. I also expose myself to a lot of like movies, TV shows, and mainly games. And the combination of all that has influenced the type of stories that I write.
Okay. No, yeah, that totally makes sense. Like a lot of people are like, for example, for me with the videography, and people would always ask me like, "Oh, what movies do you watch? Who is your favorite director and stuff like that?" I'm like, I don't have one.
Exactly, like that's why I
Yeah,
said that. Like I don't really have like a besides like say Brandon Sanderson for like like the stuff he talks about.
yeah.
But like I only read one of his books so far at least, which might which might get me some angry comments, but but I do love Elantris. That was pretty good. If even his first book was okay, like some people
Right.
say it was okay, but like for me, I thought it was really good.
Mm.
But like I read and listen to what I find that I'm interested in. But I guess if you were to say one thing that influenced me the most in terms of like media in general is like the Tron franchise,
Oh my
and
God.
not
You
and not
love Tron.
and
Love them.
not the Bitcoin currency thing that's going around. I mean, the little game with the programs in the computer. Yes, there's a
Yes.
Bitcoin named Tron.
Is that legal? What?
That's an actual thing. Like if you search for Tron on Twitter, there's a little Bitcoin icon next to it. You have to specify. It's really
Wow.
dumb. Even these Tron subreddit bans people for mentioning the Bitcoin version.
Oh my goodness. How did they get a hold of
I
that?
have no
They
idea.
probably didn't because like this is something that happened with Microsoft. Like they probably didn't like they didn't pay for the rights again or something for that year. So they got a hold of it. I've been hearing stuff like that all over. There's Sierra Mist, the soda.
I haven't heard of
You don't
that
know
one.
Sierra Mist?
I don't think so.
Sierra Mist, okay, it's a soda. It's like Sprite. It has like a picture of a lemon or something on it. But anyway, there's a soda called Sierra Mist,
Mm.
and there was an artist that's now Sierra Mist because the company of the soda didn't pay for the licensing, so she got it, and they tried to buy it from her, and she's like, "No, it's mine now."
Oh my
So they had to rename,
gosh.
and then apparently like the reason why Apple has the option to like let you snap the windows in the four corners, like you know how you do that on Mac. I mean on Windows.
Like screenshot.
So you take like a browser, like a window, and then you pull it to the side so it gets snapped into place. You know what I'm talking about? So like if you drag it to the corner, a box will appear, and then you let go and it snaps, and that's how you check another one.
Oh,
Yeah,
that. Yeah, I
that.
see. I see what you mean now.
So Apple didn't have that for a long time until this year, or they announced that that's coming, and people are like, "We've had that on Windows and forever." That's the reason. Apparently, supposedly, allegedly, the reason is because Microsoft
Interesting.
didn't pay for the patent, so they got a hold of it. And now a lot more people are gonna do it. So yeah,
Yeah, that's why I wanted to like mention that about the Tron thing because
that's
I
crazy.
wanted to specify just in case. But yeah, like uh, Tron, like Tron Legacy, Tron Uprising, those have seriously like revitalized my drive and my desire to write because the sheer like the world building in Tron is like so different and otherworldly and so interesting that it just drew me in. Like I drank it all up.
Ate it up.
I ate it up, and I never let go of it. I still listen to some of the music, the Tron Legacy music sometimes. I follow whatever Tron news that comes out whenever it does, and just a lot of like the technology in the grid from that world has influenced like the style and aesthetic from some of that from some of the story that I'm writing in Project Vanguard.
Hmm.
Tron was the second thing. The first one was, I believe, Fantasy Star Portable 2. I think that was like the first thing ever that was like jump started me into like the whole like sci-fi
Okay.
obsession.
Hmm. Um. All right, so we're gonna wrap it up here. My last question for you is that what is your vision for yourself as a writer? Like, where do you want to be? Like, what is it that will make you feel like I made it or successful or like where do you want to be as a writer? Like, what's your goal in the future?
In terms of goals, I always For the longest time when I was starting out, I thought of myself like I remember seeing like the community surrounding franchises like Tron and Dot Hack and smaller media that you don't really get exposed to unless it finds you, kind of thing.
Hmm.
And I was like, I'd like to have a cult following kind of thing. Like, and it feels weird to say because you not necessarily wanted. I not necessarily wanted to be popular, but I wanted to have like a community of people to like talk about my stuff or like just stuff that like we can all like gather
Hmm.
around and just hang out together about and you know
No,
kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah, I get it.
And like that goal has always like been at least part of my my at least been in part of my mind as I went on to like write more stories. But it hasn't been like the primary focus. I know I can't really control how popular I become. I guess a more tangible goal that I had is really to just get all of the story ideas I have onto the page and out there. Because for like a long time in my life, I never really had the opportunity to like do that. Like I never really knew where to point my ideas toward, and it just built up and up and up in my head to the point where like it kept shifting and moving and changing, and now I'm just like finally getting like a glimpse of the idea of what I want to do, and it feels honestly so good.
I'm happy for you. I'm glad that because he really has been on a journey trying to figure out what he wanted. He went from being an artist to being a game designer to being what was the other thing before that? You were like doing like artist as in like drawing, did 3D digital art, game designing, paintings, clay, a bunch of stuff, and then finally.
Yeah, like I first I thought it I thought it at first I thought I wanted to be a game designer
Hmm.
because technology equals like game design or making games, and I thought, what if I had this idea that I wanted to like make this game version of my idea like in like a city. And once I realized that game design was not at all what I imagined it to be, like you have to code, you have to really get behind the computer to really get work on it from a foundational level. I immediately had to back off from it, and I was
He
like,
was like,
okay,
nope,
so what
nope.
if I
Hmm.
went from a more artistic angle, like the visual aspect, and I looked at 3D art and animation, and then I realized that it's very slow and methodical and very
Very like
it's
patient and
you
time
have to be,
consuming,
yeah,
and that yeah.
not to mention, like you have to animate frame by frame, every single little detail,
Hmm.
especially the lip syncing. When I saw that, I was like,
It just wasn't like the speed that you wanted to get that creation out. It just
right.
wasn't.
Like it
Yeah.
didn't meld well with like it didn't
Hmm.
mesh well with the pace of the ideas I wanted to get out.
And then finally,
And
go
finally, I
write a
was able to
book.
talk to talk to someone who told me to
Go
get
write a book.
to write a book.
And then there it is. And then yeah. And then here we are. He has two books out, working on his third. Couldn't be prouder. So yeah, so that is this our first episode of this podcast. I don't know what we're gonna call it, but we just wanted to do something and to talk about his accomplishments. This video will also be available on his channel, Dan Writes
Dan writes stuff.
Dan Writes Stuff, and still be sure to subscribe there. We thank you all for listening. Please be sure to once again check out his books, The Herrscher Files and The Dark Trials, available right now on Amazon. You see him? You see him? Okay, great. They're not that expensive. They're a short read. You can get through them in a morning or an afternoon if you just put some time aside. They're also available digitally. What do you want to add?
I almost forgot because there's specifically for the Herrscher files that's also published on Draft or Digital. Most services that you can find through Draft or Digital and Smashwords. There's a month-long sale going on through Smashwords, and through that sale, I put my first book, The Herrscher Files, completely free for the entirety of the month. So if you feel like it, you can just grab it from smashwords.com and see if you like it.
So like this month of July.
This month of July.
So you see that you get a book for free. What are you waiting for? So all of that information will be down in the description. And once again, please comment. We want to hear from you. If you have any questions, and also leave us questions if you have for Dan to have in our next session, whenever that may be. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you for listening.